evening or good afternoon or good morning. Welcome to Fired Up. This is Bob Irwin. I'm your host for the show. We are coming to you broadcasting from the law office of Alan Butel in downtown Las Vegas. Alan is an attorney who handles criminal defense and civil litigation, who allows us to use his office, and he frequently appears on our show as a guest attorney. He was on 2 weeks ago, I believe. Anyway, this show, as regular listeners know, is all about, wow, losing my voice already. It's all about guns, related politics, and self-defense issues. Fired Up is on radio at KSHP 1400 AM. It is a rebroadcast of this show. It comes on Sunday mornings between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. You can look up KSHP 1400 AM radio. It's streamed all over the world, like most radio is nowadays. And this show, of course, is going on live right now at YouTube. It's broadcast about 1.5 seconds after we actually do it. It's on the air. Anyway, we're on if you can't get the YouTube show or you missed something on it, it stays up on YouTube virtually forever. There are shows on YouTube, on our YouTube channel or on YouTube directly, going back about 4.5 years now. My guest this week is firearms instructor and certified terrorism expert, Lenny Davis. Lenny's a regular. He's been here a lot. He is really expert person on this. Lenny, welcome to the show again.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here.
Little of your background for anybody who hasn't possibly heard of you.
Yeah, well, I know there might be a couple out there. My name's Lenny Davis. I am a retired special agent with Department of Homeland Security, and I spent about 8 years working for the U.S. State Department as a contract instructor and subject matter expert in anti-terrorism. And now I am the Director of Investigations and Training for a firm here in Las Vegas, Techstratics International.
Cool. Your retirement job.
This is actually my third retirement job, or fourth.
Okay. Anyway, if you have a question or comment about anything on the show, you can send me an email or a text at the address behind me on the sign, bob@firedupmail.com. Don't forget the mail word in there, bob@firedupmail, because bob@firedup doesn't work, as we've discovered from several people calling me. I also have now a recorder in my office. The number is there, 702-257-1060. I check that at least every 24 hours. If you had a question or comment, please leave your information there and contact information so I can call you back. We do answer every text and every inquiry by email. If you want to talk to or ask a question of one of our guests or one of our guest attorneys, just send it there to bob@firedupmail and say in your mail that you want to get in contact with whoever it is, and we will forward the email or the phone message directly to them. Now, there are several hundred defensive uses of firearms every week in the United States, mostly not covered by the mainstream media. So we always start out with a few cases of civilians using firearms for self-defense, so that you realize when you do that, you won't be the only one in town. It is a very common thing for people to use firearms for self-defense. I think here in Las Vegas, we've had something like 6 cases this week of people shooting at home invaders, carjackers, etc.
Some good, some not so good.
Yeah, but it's a common thing, and we'll reiterate throughout the show. If you have a permit, carry your gun. The bad guys are out there. Fired Up is a nationwide show, worldwide actually. We often use Nevada cases as, or what we're covering in the shooting cases, simply because I get more details about those. But the diagnosis that we use on the air here is to prevent you, the listener, from getting sued out of your socks or going to jail for making some petty mistake. If you have an actual case that is working, you have shot somebody, you need an attorney, you're being sued over something related to your firearm, you need to get local counsel in the city, county that you live in. The laws vary dramatically all across the country. What is a good shooting in Nevada is not a good shooting in New York City. And you know that goes without saying, but we are dramatically different than our sister state to the west. At least at the moment, our legislature is working on making us Eastern California. Anyway, the idea is to make your shooting reasonable under whatever laws you're under. You were in danger, you reacted reasonably. If you get sued, you don't lose the lawsuit. If there's a criminal investigation, you don't go to jail. That's the whole point of this. So here we go. This was a case most everybody's familiar with, and I only want to make a couple of high points on it. This was on the 16th. A pair of inmates escaped from Georgia. They murdered 2 corrections officers when they got off their prison bus. Somehow they got loose. They managed to get off the bus. They murdered the 2 correction officers and took off. Their capture eventually put they were captured after a long involved thing, and anyway, they stole a car carjacked a car, then they carjacked another car after they crashed that one. They threatened several people with death and beat up people and this and that, and they finally at the end, when they cracked up the last car they'd stolen, the police were had a report of a stolen vehicle. It turned out to be these 2 guys. They were doing a 10-mile chase, ended up on Interstate 24 South outside of Nashville. The escapees crashed the truck, ran from the wreck. Several SUVs were hit. The escapees opened fire on deputies, but no one was injured. They ran from their vehicle into the woods, were discovered by a homeowner who called his neighbor, and the 2 gentlemen then grabbed their guns, their rifles, and approached these 2 guys who surrendered. They apparently had lost the gun. They had a pile of stolen guns by this point. They'd lost those in the crash when they totaled their car, or somebody else's car. And through this whole thing, the pair had stolen 5 vehicles, robbed 2 homes, tied up and terrorized an elderly couple, and led the police on this chase that was over 100 miles an hour, etc. The 2 guys the 2 neighbors who held them, walked out, saw them, held them at gunpoint on the concrete or on the street in front of their house, stopped this whole thing. The sheriff in the county later made some comments about, well, the bad guys were surrendering, so they weren't going to pay the reward, and that's gone back and forth. There was something like $100,000 reward offered for these guys. But the point of the whole story is a couple of armed civilians captured these 2 guys that had done all these crimes, and the 2 officers, Christopher Manica, was 42 years old. He was a sergeant, worked for the department almost 8 years, and was married. Curtis Billu was 58, a 10-year employee, was survived by his father, brother, and sister, according to the Georgia Department of Corrections. We've lost track in all this crap about these 2 guys that were all over the paper that these 2 officers lost their lives. And now, hopefully, these guys are going to pay for it. 2 civilian heroes. Got them.
I hope the sheriff in the county is misspoke when he said they weren't going to pay the reward for these two civilians, because these guys had them at gunpoint when the police finally showed up.
Yeah.
They took them into custody. They had them at gunpoint. They deserve every nickel of that $100,000 reward or whatever it is, because you got two guys that are obviously violent criminals. They had a crime spree all over 2 or 3 states. They started it by murdering a couple of correctional officers. So these are not nice folks. These are the guys that need to go down. And these two civilians did what cops normally do: go out there and take these guys into custody. So, my hat's off to them, and I sure hope that this sheriff doesn't try to renege on this deal.
Yeah, that would be. These are rural folks. They don't have all the money in the world, and both of them got big families, and it's. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to walk out. They didn't know the guys didn't have any more guns.
Yeah.
They anyway, hopefully that'll get changed and they'll get get some money out of it, which would be nice. Sponsor Grant Defense at 5580 South Decatur. That's at the corner of Russell and Decatur in Las Vegas. They manufacture AR-15s and actually manufacture AR-15s here in Las Vegas, and some amazing Glock pistols. If you are in the market for a carry gun, their ARs are great, but I was more impressed with their customization of Glocks, 17s and 19s. Before you buy a Glock, go over and look at one of these. They're right next to the Dewey Animal Shelter. If you go out their back door, you're in the Dewey Animal Shelter's parking lot, so they're easy to find. And you can buy yourself a guard puppy while you're there at the Dewey Animal Shelter.
Get a pistol and a pit bull.
Yeah.
There you go. Home Defense 101.
WSWB Fox 5 News in San Diego reported on the 14th of this month in Boulevard, California. Boulevard, I don't know the population today. When I looked it up, the population the last census in 2010 was 315 people. So not a large community, probably. Anyway, an 85-year-old guy who lives there opened fire on a suspected car burglar at his rural home shortly after 4 a.m. on a Wednesday, after which the wounded intruder allegedly continued attempting to steal vehicles, burned down an auxiliary residence on the property, a trailer, an auxiliary residence, before being arrested. Deputies arrived to find the 29-year-old suspect suffering from a bullet wound to his right arm, according to Sheriff Sergeant Carlos Medina. They arrested him without incident. Medics took him to the hospital. The property owner told investigators he had spotted the man in his yard. Now, back to the beginning, this was at 4 a.m. He spotted the guy in his yard, seemingly trying to steal his car. He went outside and told the trespasser to get off his property. The individual started yelling and rushed the property owner, who retreated inside his house. Good idea. The property owner then armed himself with a handgun, but remained inside the house while the suspect continued to move about the property, yelling and acting in an emotionally disturbed manner. Fearing for his and his wife's safety, the resident fired 4 shots in the direction of the man in an attempt to scare him off. Well, actually, one of them hit the guy. Although wounded, the suspect remained on the property prior to the arrival of deputies. He allegedly broke into vehicles, entered an unoccupied prefab home, removed items from inside of it, and then set it on fire. The blaze destroyed that structure completely. The property owner and his wife suffered no injuries in the violent encounter. The husband was not detained after the shooting. It appears, this is the officer Medina. He said it appears he was defending his property, his home, and his wife, and himself. The individual is expected to face charges of arson, burglary, and attempted auto theft upon his release from medical care. We've talked a lot on this show about warning shots. In this particular case, what the elderly, the 85-year-old guy claims is that they were warning shots and one of them happened to hit the guy. And that happens. Sometimes warning shots hit something. Anyway, the warning shots wounded the individual who was tearing up his property. Given the violence of the trespasser's actions, lighting a building on fire and so on and so on, the gunfire seems to be not unreasonable. That's my choice of words in saying it appears reasonable.
Yeah.
It appears not unreasonable. The comment by the sheriff's sergeant about protecting his property is not well-founded under the law. But the wacko lighting buildings on fire certainly placed the couple in danger of death or serious bodily harm. So he's burning the building next to them. Theirs could be next. A good shoot by reasonable standards, in my opinion. This is a very defensible shooting, but this is California. And I don't really know what happens here if we have this wacko hire one of the zillion lawyers who advertises on TV.
Well,
and he got shot.
The good thing that this happened in San Diego County and not in Los Angeles County or some others, Marin County,
San
Francisco County. Actually, I've done, over the years working with a lot of the guys from, originally Customs and then Homeland Security in San Diego. The DA's office there is pretty reasonable. San Diego County Sheriff is one of the few sheriffs that actually will issue CCW permits to its citizens. This is rural, very rural eastern San Diego County. I think I think this is going to be fine, even in the People's Republic of California, because of this guy set that other building on fire. And if I'm in the house with my wife, I'm going to look at this as saying, is this building next? So I'm going to fire at him to keep him away. So I think he's going to be okay on this.
I would hope so. I mean, this is high desert east of San Diego. It's a very sparsely populated area, and another 100 feet it would be in Mexico or in that abouts. I just, you can't tell an 85-year-old guy if the guy's out in their yard lighting a house on fire, don't shoot.
Yeah.
He's going to look at you and say, Sonny, I was defending my house when I was, Yeah. Like that's old. It's 12 years older than me, So I'll be there. But this is a good shoot virtually anywhere. I just don't like the California courts.
Well,
if he gets sued over this and loses because they won't prosecute it, the appeal into the appellate system in California is going to be a disaster. Probably. Hopefully not. It's just one of those things, Anyway, it's a good shoot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One of our sponsors, Jerry Creed, attorney at law. He does firearms trust, class 3 firearms trust, and elder law. Free consultations at 702-806-7777. His office is out in Summerlin. If you have a firearms trust, or in particular a class 3 trust that is greatly in flux at the moment, Congress is looking at possibly taking silencers off of the class 3 designation. That bill is getting a lot of support. The number of silencers that are used in crime is essentially none. You ever run across one? A bad guy?
Not in this country.
Yeah.
I never ran across one here. I did overseas in a couple of, and they were more cartel types.
Yeah.
But even the cartels are not. They're more into firepower than they are into being quiet about it. You go to you go into El Paso, Texas, and you listen across the border in the city of Juarez every night, and you'll be amazed at the gunfire that goes on down south.
Yeah, and it's funny because when this get back to Jerry in just a second. One of the things that came up when the left were yelling about they can't make silencers legal because all these shot spotter type systems that hear gunfire and theoretically computer notify the nearest police unit to respond. There's a gunshot here or there. They use them in Chicago and in some places.
Works so well in Chicago.
And yeah, they get the police there.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is the people that run there's a couple companies that I'm using shot spotters. That's the main one, but there's a couple of other people that did the same thing. Their computer listening devices don't hear the gunshot anyway. It measures sudden changes in air pressure is what it hears. And that's how it differentiates people dropping 2x4s or a car backfire from a gunshot. It can tell the minuscule air changes makes a pressure change in the air. That's what it hears. Shot spotters hear guns with silencers. So anyway, Jerry Creed, with all these changes coming in Class 3 trusts, if you have one of those, you probably want to contact Jerry and make sure your trust is current to follow all the regulations. Now you're looking at a 14 or 15 page firearms trust. If you've got one that's one page that you got off the internet, you need to have an attorney look at it. It probably isn't what you need anymore. CBS TV 6 on the 16th of, wow, I was really up late typing this, of 2127. Okay, well, 2017. In Victoria, Virginia, shortly after 9 p.m. Thursday, an adult male subject entered the Little B convenience store. It's in the 1700 block of Main Street in Victoria, according to the Virginia State Police spokesperson named Corrine Geller. The male subject was wearing a mask, displayed a handgun, and demanded money from the cash register. As the armed robber fled the store, shots were fired. The robbery suspect ran across the street to the parking lot and collapsed on 6th Street. He died at the scene. The would-be robber's body was transported to the office of Chief Medical Examiner in Richmond for examination. So his name has not been released. The store employee, an adult male, was not injured in the shooting. Officers recovered both the robber's gun and the store employee's firearm at the scene. The state police said the incident remains under investigation, and they're being assisted by the town of Victoria Police Department, the Lunenburg County Sheriff's Office. State police is also working in conjunction, so and so on. This is a typical case that depends on timing, and this is why I brought it up. The guy came into the store, displayed a gun, he's wearing a mask, and demanded money, and then an employee fired at him and he ran. It is in the timing of what he was doing when the shots were fired. We see these cases over and over again. I've worked several of them in court myself. And if the shot was fired while the guy was in the store and perhaps turning to flee, it's a good shooting. If he was out of the store and there's a dwell time between the robbery and the shots being fired later as he's 20 feet outside the store in the parking lot running, then it can be firing at a person who is not a threat to you. Virginia is not known as the most gun-friendly state in the world. You can bring an assault rifle to a baseball game in Virginia. The point is the timing, and if the shots are fired as a part of the same motion, the robbery takes place, when the store employee comes up with his gun, one of the things the robber's going to do is going to turn to get out of the way of the gunshots, or to deflect the gunshots by putting his hands up like this and turning and ducking. So that's the normal schoolyard reaction that we have built into our DNA to when somebody's going to shoot us. Like, it won't hurt if you turn your back. So if the shots are fired during that motion, you may get shots that hit the bad guy in the back. That's fine. That happens every day. If there's more dwell time and the guy's out the door 15, 20 feet, we may have a serious problem here of the clerk being charged with a crime. The convenience store setting, to me, says video surveillance. And hopefully there is video of this and video of the shooting being valid, and this whole case will fall on what that video shows. There's no way around it. The witnesses will remember different things. They're all ducking and whatever while the shots are being fired. People in stop and rob stores are not very good at explaining what happened because everybody's diving into the tile.
Yeah.
The tape will tell the story, and hopefully it's good, and hopefully it tells the story that is in favor of the police, because they don't like guys who come in and rob people at gunpoint.
Yeah, this reminded me of several years ago here in Las Vegas, where the jewelry store owner was robbed, and a gentleman went to leave. The bad guy went to leave, and he had two doors. He got through the first door and was getting ready to open the second door when the store owner opened up on him and shot and killed him. And the video evidence was compelling that this guy was no longer a threat at that point. So,
and it was, and the papers ran with that, and they showed the actual videotape on the news all the time. And you know, that's an interesting case, because I did do some work on that case, and one of the interesting things, the guy had basically asked to see a very expensive watch. The clerk handed him the watch instead of showing it to him while he's holding it. I don't know how that happened, because the jewelers are smarter than that. But anyway, the guy grabbed the watch and ran for the door. The guy behind the counter is not on camera, so you cannot see when the shot was fired. You see the guy in the doorway reacting to the shot and then falling out on the sidewalk. There was a reflection, however, in some shiny objects on the opposite wall that were caught on camera, and you can see the gun flash. And that flash is when the round was fired by his Korean owner who didn't communicate very well. And the shooting was valid. When he fired that round, the guy was facing him and going out the door, and actually making a motion that could be interpreted as going for a gun. It could have been putting the watch away, but there was some motion there with his hands that made it look like he wasn't playing. But you have to understand, when the guy gets hit with the bullet, he doesn't immediately go, ah! It punches a little round hole right through, and people keep going. If they're running, they keep running. If they decide to fall down, they fall down, but they fall down later. The bullet goes through, unless it hits him in the brain, they don't react immediately. If he's running and you hit him through the brain, he's going to run a few more steps, because that's the last command that his body got. So when the shot was fired, it was about a second and a half before the guy actually does the that he's hit. That's his reaction to a bullet that hit him 1 second earlier. So it was a good shoot. That's where that went. So I remember the case.
Yeah.
We're always talking about training here, and if you carry a firearm, you got to learn the rules so you don't do things that some people do here. Rules of engagement, use of warnings if possible, etc. I no longer work at the gun store, as many of you know. I'm retired from there, but they still do teach their concealed weapon classes which are low cost. I strongly recommend their classes. They start at 9 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. If you're getting a renewal, the first 5 hours of that class are for everybody, the renewals and the new people. If you're a renewal, you'll get at the end of the lunch break, you'll shoot your gun for qualification, and you'll be off to Metro to pay them $100. If you're getting a new permit, or you let yours expire for a year or more, then you need to take the second half of class. And the nice thing with the gun store is they teach the class. Most everybody in town that has concealed weapon classes puts you on a list, and they'll call you if they have enough people. The gun store runs the class every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. Show up at 8:30. You'll get in. You can sign up online, thegunstorelasvegas.com. Do that. It's $55, I think, for the renewal, and $75 for the longer class for the first time permit. But the advantage is, one, I wrote the lesson plan, and two, they run the class. You won't end up there and be told to come back next week. WKMG TV 6 News. It's also, they run as clickorlando.com. Reports on the 15th in Pine Hills of this month, in Pine Hills, Florida. An incident started around 5:30 p.m. at Computers for Less on Pine Hills and Silver Star Road. It's near Evans High School, if you know where that is. Store manager shot a teenager suspected of trying to rob the store, according to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. The young suspect went into the store, broke some display cases, and removed a bunch of cell phones. The manager chased the teenager outside, caught him, and a scuffle ensued. The teen broke away, and the manager fired shots at him. The teen was hit in the leg and limped away, according to the sheriff's office. A witness said he had just finished shopping when he had to drop to the ground and take cover. The next thing you know, this is the witness saying, all you heard was pop, 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 pop. He said, I was standing there and I was looking. He, the suspect, was jumping up and literally saying, please don't shoot me again. He's basically hopping on one leg across the street. I see a young guy running, and the guy shot him in the leg, said another shopper. It was like, ooh, that's it. A 911 call received a short time later from a nearby apartment complex reporting someone had been shot. The deputies found the teen, who was their suspect, who was treated by a medical person who happened to be there before the paramedics arrived. What we have here is a property crime. The manager chases and catches his thief. When the thief breaks away, he then uses deadly force for a threat that's not there. Unless the manager was seriously injured in the scuffle, and I think it would have been mentioned that, you know, he got his head beat in or something. Unless the fleeing person prevents a danger to other humans, gunfire is not a reasonable solution. In the case we talked about a few minutes ago, the guy had a gun and pointed it at the store and then fled. So there was reason to believe the guy was armed and he had threatened people. This guy smashing display cases and stealing cell phones. You can buy a cell phone on the street for $10 if you want a stolen cell phone. This is nothing. I hope this guy is not in trouble, but if he's got a gun in his store, he should hopefully know the rules or have taken a class or something. I can bet this is not a concealed weapon holder. Florida requires a class now for their permits, and nobody do this that had a permit from the state of Florida that went through the class. So property crime is property crime. Fortunately, the kid was only hit in the leg. I keep saying kid because I don't think I put it in here, but I believe this was a 15-year-old, if I recall correctly. So you shot a 15-year-old that stole some cell phones. Breaking the display cases was more expensive.
Yeah, it was a bad shoot. You just don't chase a kid down. I mean, if you're going to chase a kid down and he gets away, you don't shoot him. You don't try to use deadly force. He probably got angry because the kid got away. We had that several years ago with that man that had two guys were burglarizing his house here in Las Vegas, and he walked in on the burglars, and they used a stun gun and incapacitated him, tied him up in the bedroom, and continued to ransack and burglarize his house. Well, he got loose, and these guys didn't clear the closet, and he got a hold of a Mossberg 500 shotgun. He encountered the first one in his kitchen and shot and killed him, which was a good shoot. The other one turned around, fled the residence, and he chased him down the sidewalk. And as the guy started to get away, he got angry and basically loosed around and shot him in the back and killed him. So he pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter.
I remember that. The didn't work on that one. The threat has to be there at the time you fire, and it has to be a reasonable threat. You can't shoot people over property crimes. And if they are running, the crime is over. Can't do this. Anyway, there's another story here I want to get to, and this is just it's a shooting case.
I'm shocked.
But it's well, I just have to read it. This is so unusual that I just had to put it in the outline. This is KSL 5 TV or KSL.com. Reported on the 20th of this month, yesterday, day after yesterday, day before yesterday, in Riverton, Utah. Just before 11 p.m., police were called to the 11,000 block of South Winford Drive on the report of a shooting, said Unified Police Lieutenant Brian Lorkey. It's a unified department that covers the rural area. A 36-year-old subject who was at a friend's house nearby and became intoxicated. He went outside and for some unknown reason began undressing and redressing in the middle of the road. 11 o'clock at night, okay, we got a falling down drunk, dressing and undressing in the middle of the road. Two teenage boys who were driving home nearby saw what was happening and kept driving. They didn't want to pull into their garage because of this guy. So they went around the block and called their parents. The boys' parents then looked out when they got the phone call at the window and decided the solution was to open the garage and then have the boys drive directly in so the guy didn't have time to approach them. After the boys got into their house, the subject, now with his clothing back on, began walking toward their house. The father went out to confront him in the driveway. The father was holding a gun in one hand, attempted to pin the subject to the ground in the front yard. A fight ensued. The father was successful in pinning the subject, but the fight kind of continued. So the father got up and tried to go back into the house. The subject followed him into the garage, which is apparently an attached garage. Witnesses said the conversation went something like, the guy says, the subject says, "That gun's not even loaded." And the father said, "It is loaded." The subject then pulled a knife out of his pocket and asked, "Are you going to shoot me now?" At that point, the subject threw his knife at the homeowner or dropped it. Not sure. There was some motion with the knife. In any case, that motion caused the father, who was holding a gun, to shoot twice, hitting the subject in the jaw and in the chest. As the whole thing was going on, the mother at home, called 911. Arriving officers found the subject on the ground and the father still watching over him with his gun. The officers, of course, don't know who's who. They got a shots fired call, a guy laying on the ground, and a guy holding a gun. So they order the father to drop the gun. So the father, you already want to drop your gun.
Yeah.
So the father set the gun down, and then the father got on the ground away from the gun. The homeowner was placed in handcuffs. That's when the subject got up. What the guy that apparently the police thought was the victim now gets up, saw the gun, and jumped over to try to grab it. The officers paying attention were able to get the gun first, and then the subject made a run for the house. So the officers tased the guy. He was taken into custody. The subject was tased and taken into custody. He's taken to a local hospital in serious condition. The father, in this case, after they sort out who's who, was not arrested. With 20/20 hindsight, obviously, it would have been easier for the father to just stay in the house. The police were on the way anyway. It appears from my reading of this, there's way more than alcohol involved in this. But there's some good things here. When the father, when the police arrived and the father was told, put the gun down, he did. Get on the ground, he did. The officers handcuffed him, which is entirely normal. The officers are seeing a guy on the ground, apparently injured, and this guy standing there holding a gun. They're going to secure the scene first. They don't know who's who. When they got it straightened out, the father was not arrested. This guy is just some apparently drugged up wacko. The better solution, knowing what we know now, was for the father to just stay in the house and wait for the police to arrive. This is such an idiotic case. This wouldn't happen in a billion years. I've often said that there's no two shootings that are ever the same, but then you run across one that is just.
Well, there certainly won't be one like this again.
I would hope not. I just read this and I was laughing so hard I just started typing it, and it's in the outline. It's not even a self-defense case, but there we are. So.
Well, I mean, I kudos to the father. He hit the guy in the chest and the jaw.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't know what he hit him with. Obviously, it wasn't a good, super great shot. But again, if you stay inside your house, if there's somebody out there, and the police are on the way, then stay inside your house. If you got your kids, I could see him going out there to make sure the kids, if the guy didn't come under the garage door or something like that.
Yeah, that's the only flaw in the whole thing.
Yeah, and had he done that and stayed in the house, that would have been and then at that point, the guy would have got arrested. If he tried to break in the house, he would have had a absolute perfect case for self-defense. I mean, all's well that ends well, but again, this thing is, it could have been a real tragedy, because had this subject got a hold of that gun, the officers had been distracted or something, no telling who could have gotten killed in that thing. So it's better to not engage somebody outside your house, and lock the doors, call the police, and wait. Make them come to you. If they're going to come to you, if they're crazy enough to break in your door, you at that point would be well within your rights to defend yourself with deadly force.
How about shooting through the door? Salt Lake Tribune. This is on the 21st, yesterday. About 6 p.m., a female day before yesterday, a female subject and two men entered a Quiznos at 1775 South, 4100 West. It's Salt Lake addresses, folks. As they entered, they locked the door behind them and produced two handguns. There were two employees in the store, one at the front counter, one in the back room. While one of the robbers was attempting to get money from the register, the other two robbers tried to get into the back room. There, the second employee barricaded herself behind the door by pushing on it with her body. Apparently didn't have a lock on the door. And then began firing the gun she had around the edges of the door. She apparently is trying not to hit them, thinking they're standing, pushing on the door. So I would presume these are warning shots. The employee fired between 2 and 6 shots. At first time, we didn't know how many. The police didn't go ahead with that. One bullet hit the female robber, another hit a window. When the female robber was hit, the 2 males fled, leaving her, of course, taking an undisclosed amount of cash, according to Salt Lake Police Detective Greg Wilking. The female subject, who was hit in the neck, is in serious condition Wednesday at a hospital. No shots were fired by the robbers. Police, meanwhile, were looking for a male person of interest affiliated with the female subject, a 36-year-old who may be driving a red Nissan Versa with Utah license plates. The plate was in the article. Also saw it was a person of interest, another male, 30 to 40 years old with short hair. Well, that'll be easy to find. Detective Wilkins said the employee began shooting because of the severity of the situation. It was a takeover robbery, which is much more dangerous for everyone involved. He said, "We don't see very many of these. It's a very scary situation." A takeover robbery is a really scary situation. When they locked the front door when they came in, that obviously can be corrected so that people walking in can't lock the door and lock you in. But anyway, there's a few things wrong with the security here, but I'm sure they've addressed that. The female employee trapped in the back room with apparently no lock on the door was clearly in mortal danger. Got 2 guys with guns are trying to shove the door in. I don't see any problem. She was trying to fire apparently where they weren't. Anyway, was deadly force necessary? Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it absolutely was. Her life was in danger. The shooting without a clear target is something we really don't recommend, obviously. But here it was very reasonable. She was attempting to fire away from where the people were standing. I think it's a good shoot. Obviously, we can look at this and go, wow, we need to change the systems in Quiznos.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there's some security measures that need to be changed. I think actually, and looking at this, and as we've said, a takeover robbery is a very, very nasty thing. They're usually, the majority of those usually end up with a homicide of the store owners. I think, in fact, in this case, had she shot through the door, to try to directly hit these guys, I think she would have been fine.
I agree. It would have been a good choice.
She was, she was trying to do, in her defense, she was trying to not necessarily hurt somebody, just get them to get away from them.
She's locked in and they're armed. I mean, this is a whole lot different from the guy chasing people in the parking lot. And I'm sure they're by now this Nissan Versa has been recovered, and maybe it was stolen. They didn't say that in the article. They did have the plate,
right?
Because they had it on camera. This place did have cameras, and you got to be an idiot to do this kind of robbery. But these are like the 2 guys are 36, and the other one is 30 to 40 years old, at least 35. They're guessing. These aren't kids.
Well, and I'll guarantee you, these guys are when they're caught, they're going to have a criminal record. They're going to be, because I mean, come on, you're hitting a Quiznos. Okay, yeah, the subs are great, but it's not like hitting a bank. You're not going to get a lot of money out of this place. It's not like hitting a marijuana dispensary or something like that, where there's a lot of cash. This is a real stupid thing to do. So these guys were not exactly rocket science. So it scares me when I see people for a really low value target are going to go in and do a takeover robbery, which, like I said, usually ends up with someone in the store owners getting killed. So it was pretty ugly.
Yeah, that's fairly scary. I can't imagine being in their store when you see them lock the door when they enter and they've got guns.
Mm-hmm.
you got a fight on your hands and your life's
Yep.
about to be taken if you don't do something. So God bless her for doing her job and saving everything. We are, I want to address with Lenny here the reaction to the Republican congressional shooting, the baseball shooting. The left side of the political spectrum, now they're denying it, of course, but they have for years advocated violence. This is just my editorial opinion against conservative demonstrators, conservative speakers at every venue you can imagine, as well as encouraged and applauded physical attacks on police officers. They did everything but hand the guy the bricks to throw at the police in whatever demonstration you want to name. Now one of their true believers apparently acted out with an assault rifle, no less. Disgusting but predictable result of the left advocating violence against university professors that speak on conservative and having their whites only, their blacks only meetings and Black Lives Matters and all that crap. Blue Lives Matter, everybody's lives matters, but they've been advocating violence for years. I'm getting off track here, but I'm not surprised this happened, and I will not be surprised if it continues.
Oh, absolutely.
And anyway, in a joint statement update on the status of the shooting in Alexandria, the ATF said they recovered the weapons, included a 9mm handgun and a .7.62 caliber rifle, which apparently was an SKS.
Yeah,
rifle.
SKS.
The ATF did conduct traces on these weapons, and it was determined that both were purchased by the shooter from federal firearms licensees, and they have no evidence to suggest the purchases were not lawful. The guy had no criminal history, apparently. So now we are advocating some way for Congress people to protect themselves.
Yeah, we were discussing before the show.
Yeah.
They're talking about trying to look at a couple of different options, which I don't. So far, what I've heard is not. I don't think really a good one. You can assign. They're talking about maybe signing a Capitol policeman to everybody, to all the congressmen. The problem's going to be not only even just one person. One congressman's going to take at least 5 people for their detail, even when you have just one person serving on the detail at a time, because like we discussed, it's days off, they're sick, there's training, there's those type of things. So they're only going to get one guy apiece. The cost of that's going to be phenomenal. And then you have to look at the victims that were there. There was, yes, the majority whip of Steve Scalise was shot, but also was a staffer, and also wounded was a lobbyist. So who's going to protect them? And yes, you can go out there, and if there were 8 or 10 of these guys, the congressmen there, and they had 8 or 10 bodyguards there, yeah, that would be a fairly formidable force. But for every time that you put a block in like this, there's going to be somebody who's going to get around it. This was a madman, and he drank we must resist, we have to do this. I believe in free speech in this country. I spent the majority of my adult life defending our rights to do that. But I also think that you have to be responsible, because if you say, well, you've got to go out and resist, and you've got to go out and we have to. I mean, I've seen the former Attorney General, Loretta Lynch. I've seen Bernie Sanders, who this guy was a devotee of. These people have just really sort of stopped short of saying you got to start stacking bodies in the street. And there's enough of these whack jobs and frankly, Scarlett, on both sides of the political spectrum, there are whack jobs. Violence is not the way to go. When what's got my blood pressure going crazy lately is the Antifa movement, the anti-fascist movement, and their whole thing is to attack people who have another point of view, not theirs. So that's pretty, and used violence to do that. Last time I looked, that's pretty much the textbook description of being a fascist.
I was going to mention the Indiana State Police came up with a kind of a one-liner that there was some guy driving eastbound on I-465 on Tuesday with a "Make America Great Again" flag, and it was fired on by a couple of guys going, pulled up next to it and fired on him. Didn't hit him, and then they took off. That's just stupid. That is just somebody saying, I like Donald Trump, or and that's not and they just start shooting at it.
Yeah.
What is?
Well, we have people who, and this is not a gun problem, folks. This is not a gun problem. This is a problem of whack jobs. I was amazed looking at the some of the other media outlets that they went clear back to 2011 when Gabby Giffords was shot, and trying to say that the map that was put out with crosshairs on it. So you got to keep your head on a swivel, folks.
Carry your gun. If there had been some armed civilians out there, how many people in Virginia have concealed carry permits? A lot. Had there been a couple of them there, maybe this could have helped even better. It works. Gun shows coming up. Western Trails is the next one. It's June 24 and 25 at the Orleans. I may be by there part of Saturday. Not for sure yet. Got a kind of busy schedule. I got a couple trials going on right now. The rest of them are weeks after that, so we'll just leave it with the one. We've got the Crossroads of the West gun show coming back in August. I do have passes for that one. If you want to go to Crossroads of the West, it's $10 or $12 to get in, or $15 or something. Anyway, I have some passes. Send me a note on my website there, or the address there. Next week, we've got retired homicide detective Phil Ramos, one of my all-time favorite guys. I'm going to ask him the same question about that. How do we protect all these congressmen and so forth? Yeah, well, there's some solutions I want to address with Phil. We are right on our time schedule here. We're about 3 minutes from losing our airtime, and they got to have time to put in the music and so forth on the radio program. So we are going to sign off. Any last words?
No, we didn't discuss the Flint, Michigan attack yesterday.
Yes.
Folks, if you do not believe that terrorist attacks are here, they're here.
Every day there's some attack in the United States.
And this was a flat out terrorist attack on a police officer in a small airport in Flint, Michigan. I don't go anywhere that I cannot go, anywhere unarmed that I can't go legal. I go legally. I am blessed that I have an HR 218 CCW, so I can carry in all 50 states. But it's going to happen, and you can't wait for the police to come and save you.
We are going to wrap it up. We lost our, if you would run up there and grab that little mouse and put it on the end broadcast little logo.
I can do that.
We will be off the air. Thanks for tuning in one more time. We'll be back next week with Detective Phil Ramos. Don't fail to miss it.